Welcome everyone. We are going to discuss two application layer protocols. One is FTP and another one is SMTP. So SMTP is the main protocol behind the email we are using nowadays. So FTP is used to transfer file from one host to another host. So uh, this follows a client server model where client basically initiates the transfer and server is basically a remote host. So either the client can send some file from its own file system to the remote file system, or it can access or it can retrieve some file from the remote host to its own file system. A user authentication is required in HTTP protocol. So this is how a transfer between a local file system and remote file system is happening. The local user interacts with a FTP user interface uh, and provides a host name of the remote host. And after receiving the host name, the FTP client is initiating a TCP connection with the FTP server. When the connection is being established, the user provides its identification, that is user ID, and a password to authenticate it by the FTP server. So after the authorization is done, that means the user is authorized to access the file system in the remote server. A data transfer or the file transfer can be happening between the local host and the remote host. So either the user can access some file from the remote host, that means it can download some file from the remote host to its local file system, or it can put something from the local file system to the remote file system. So this is how a file transfer between a local and remote file system is happening. Let's look at the similarities and dissimilarities between the FTP and HTTP now. So both of them uses a TCP. What is a TCP? TCP is basically a reliable connection oriented protocol that is provided by the transport layer. So the job of TCP is to transfer the data from one end to another end. So FTP uses, so what are the dissimilarities now? FTP and between HTTP. HTTP is using a single connection. What is means a single TCP connection? That means in the request or the response, the message is itself within that particular request or response. But in case of FTP, uh, the both TCP connections are different. For control, we use a control connection. For data, we use a data connection. What is a control connection? This is basically the information or the commands that we are actually giving. So for commands, we use a different connection, and for data, we use another different connection. And in case of HTTP, that is not the case. We use uh, the data in the same message we are sending the command, that is the request or response, whatever it is. So as controls are outside the data, we call the control information in FTP or out of band. In case of HTTP, as controls are merged with the data in a single message, so controls information is called in band. FTP does maintain a state of the client FTP. That means the client that are accessing the remote server or the accessing the FTP server, the state of the client is being maintained by the FTP server. Whereas we already know that HTTP is a stateless protocol. That means uh, it doesn't store any status of the client or any information about the client. So let's discuss what is a control connection and data connection in case of FTP. So the difference is simple. Control connection is used to send the control information like some password, user identification, some commands to change the remote directory, or the commands to put something on the remote file system or get something from the remote file system. And whereas the data connection is basically used to send and receive the file. So the structure should be like something like this. So first, the control connection is used using the port 21 to have all the authentication and information or whatever it is, and to give some commands to the FTP server from the FTP client. And for data transfer, this particular link, TCP data connection link with the port 20, is used for the actual data transfer. So this is the flow diagram of how a file transfer is happening using a FTP client and the FTP server. So what is happening? So using port 21, client initiates a TCP control connection. So server accepts the control connection. Then client sends its user ID and password over the control connection. That means using the port 21. So server authenticate and authorizes the user, and then client sends commands to change the remote directory and commands for file transfer. So upon receiving this command, that means the command to change the file transfer or command to receive or transfer a file, uh, actually server initiates a data connection. So this connection initiation will be done using the port 20. So in this phase, so in this sixth phase or the sixth number phase, a receiver send exactly one file. That means only one file will be transferred from the client file system to the remote file system, or vice versa, at a single instance of connection. After sending or receiving exactly one file, the TCP data connection will be closed. So server will close the TCP data connection, not the TCP uh, control connection. So this this particular thing will be repeated for all the files individually. That means we can say that this data connection, TCP data connection, is non-persistent, whereas a TCP control connection is persistent. That means it will remain for throughout the session. So after all the files is being exchanged between the local file system and remote file system, the server will close the control connection. So the TCP control connection will be closed after all the files is being transferred. So we can conclude that the TCP data connection is a non-persistent connection, whereas a TCP control connection is a persistent connection. So these are some commands and replies that we get, or that we can use to interact with the FTP server. The commands are human readable and it's ASCII format. So all the commands has basically four uppercase ASCII characters with or following some optional arguments. Like for some commands, username. So this is basically sends the server the username of the client. Then password. So this text is the password, actual password, and this is the command. So this is used to send a password from the client to the server. So this method list can list um, all the current directory files uh, in the say remote file system. So this list command is actually use port 20. That means the data connection. The result is a data. Basically, the result is a data. That means whatever using uh, we are sending the command list using the control connection, but whatever we are getting, that is a data. So that is basically you get from the data connection. Then RETR file, that is to retrieve a file from the file system or remote file system. That means it is used to get some file from the remote file system to the local file system. Store file name. So this file name, whatever file name it is, it will be stored from the local file system to the remote file system using the command stor. And what are the possible replies? So these replies are 3-digit numbers following some optional message, like we have already seen in HTML. So here are some examples, like 331, that is user okay password required. That means after providing the user command, user command, we can get this kind of error, this kind of message if the username is correct. Say 125, data connection already open, transfer starting. That means this reply can be get from the list or retrieve command, something like this. So if we don't have some permission, then we can get 452 error writing file, something like this kind of replies. So these are some examples of command and replies. There are many more commands and replies, but I have only shown this few examples. Now let's move into the emails. So how this email is being worked. So for email, we need three major components: user agent, mail server, and SMTP, that is the simple mail transfer protocol. So what is happening here? We will look into all these components individually, then we will talk about this diagram. So a user agent basically a mail reader or mail composer. So what is the job of a user agent? It is used to compose, edit, say read mails or messages. So this particular agent is used to compose, edit, read mails like Outlook, Thunderbird, iPhone mail client, and Gmail as well. So outgoing and incoming messages are stored on the server. So the server is used to store the outgoing and incoming messages, but the user agent is actually the one that is creating, editing, and reading the mails from the server. So this is a user agent. This is a mail server, suppose, and SMTP is responsible for traveling the mail from one server to another server. So if this user wants to send a mail to this user agent, so this user will create or compose a mail, and it will add that particular mail to the mail server, and mail server will use the SMTP protocol to send this particular mail from this outgoing message queue to this user's mailbox, and then user can use some other protocols to access this particular mail from this user mailbox, or to read the mail from this user mailbox. So what is a mail server? So mailbox contains incoming messages for the user. So this is the mailbox for this particular users, suppose. So this is the mailbox for this particular user. This contains the incoming mail. So this yellow boxes are basically the mailboxes that contains the incoming messages for the user. So message queue or outgoing. So this particular green boxes, they are the message queue. That means the outgoing messages will be kept on that particular message, sorry, particular queue. And SMTP protocol is used to send a mail from one server to another server. That means from the sender server the email will be sent to the receiver server. That means, or we can say that the client server to the server's side. So the mail can be sent from the client side to the server side using the SMTP protocol. So SMTP uses a TCP at the back in the transport layer. So TCP is reliable transfer. So TCP will ensure the reliable transfer. That means it will guarantee that the email from the client to the server will be delivered properly. So SMTP uses three different ports. You can use any one. Port 25, port 587, for 465. So port 465 is basically the secure one that uses SSL for security purposes. So SMTP uses direct transfer. That means the client server will send the email directly to the receiving server. So like HTTP or FTP, here also a command response like interaction can be seen. So commands are ASCII text, response are a status code and phrase like we have seen in the previous HTTP or FTP protocols. Here messages must be in 7-bit ASCII. Also the commands will also be 7-bit ASCII format. The SMTP transfer uses three phases of transfer. One is handshaking, that means the greeting. The connection will be established using this handshaking. Then the transfer of the message. So the message will be transferred from the client to the server, and then the connection will be closed. So here is a scenario where Islin is trying to send a message to Ellen. So suppose this is something happening. These 6 steps are to be followed by the Islin to send an email to Ellen. So what will happening here? So Islin will use a user agent to compose a mail to suppose some this address Ellen at some school.edu. Then Islin user agent will send the message to its mail server. So user agent will send the message to its mail server. Then this client side of SMTP will open a TCP connection with the server side of SMTP. That means the mail server, Allen's mail server. And SMTP client sends Islin's message over this TCP connection using this link or using this connection to the mail server, and keep the message in or email buffer of Alan's mailbox. And then Alan will invoke its user agent to read this particular message. So the 6 steps are to be followed when we are sending an email to some user, suppose. So this is a simple SMTP interaction. So what is happening here, we will going to see. So this first 3 steps, that is the server is sending 220 hamburger.edu. Then the client is saying hello Vips IFA. So this particular message is basically the greeting. So the handshaking is done using this message. That means this client is trying to connect to this particular server, and then server will reply with its message, say suppose pleased to meet you. Then client will have to specify from which mail id it wants to send a mail, say mail from. Using this command, it can specify the mail id. So mail from, say alice crips.fr. So suppose Alice wants to send, using this particular mail ID, the user wants to send some mail. So who will be the receipt? That also we have to specify. So for that we have to write receipt to. So this particular mail ID will be the receiver. Sorry, this particular mail ID will be the receiver. After that, the data command is invoked to enter the data or whatever the message is. So after entering the data command, you can enter, after receiving a response like this 354, enter mail and end with dot on a line by itself. That means a new line to be created to put the dot to denote the end of the message. So after invoking this data command, the client can enter whatever message it wants to send and ends it with a dot with a single line, in a single line. After that, a message will be, or from the server will come, that is 250 message accepted for delivery. So that message has been put to the outbox of the client's mail server, and then you can close the connection using the quit command. So these are the 3 steps. So first one, this greeting, then whatever interaction are going on, then the quit. So this way a simple SMTP can work. So you can try the SMTP interaction by yourself using a telnet. You have to just invoke this kind of command, telnet server name 25, the port ID. So uh, I will show this particular example. So I will show an example of SMTP interaction or sending a mail using SMTP in a separate video. I will attach the link somehow here. So you can, what you can do, you can just put these commands uh, or to try it by yourself. Okay, so I will create a separate video for this particular section where I will show you how we can send a mail using the SMTP server. So we are going to use Gmail for that. I will give a link for that. Uh, okay. So let's look at the SMTP characteristics. So it uses persistent connection. That means until the mail is completely transferred from one end or the client to the receiver, the connection will persist. So SMTP requires message header and body to be in 7-bit ASCII format. So the all the messages, all the header and the message are needed to be in 7-bit ASCII format, and SMTP server uses crlf.crlf to determine the end of message. So what is this crlf? Cr means carriage return, lf means line feed. So as we have already seen in this particular example, that this crlf means a new line with a carriage return, and this dot then followed by a carriage return new line. So this is basically the end of the message. So that is this. So SMTP server uses a crlf.crlf to determine the end of message. So these are the characteristics of SMTP protocol. So now let's look at the differences or similarities between the SMTP and HTTP. So as I have said that SMTP is a persistent connection, whereas HTTP can be persistent or non-persistent, both. So SMTP is basically used to transfer from one host to another host. Similarly, HTTP is also used to transfer from one host to another host. So what SMTP does, it transfer email from one mail server to another mail server, whereas HTTP actually transfer files that are called web objects from web server to web client. SMTP uses a command response system. HTTP also uses a command response system. SMTP uses 7-bit ASCII, whereas HTTP also uses ASCII, but there is no restriction of 7-bit or something like this. SMTP also called a push protocol. Why it is a push protocol? Because from the client side, the mail or the message is pushed to the server side, whereas HTTP is a pull protocol, because the client web server is actually pull some data or pull some web object from the web server to its own device. So this is why HTTP is pull protocol, SMTP is a push protocol. Okay, multiple object can be sent in multi-part message. That means if we have to send multi-part objects, then we have to use a multi-part message, where in HTTP different objects can be encapsulated in a single file or single response. So this is how a HTTP message format looks like. So first the header line, then a blank, then a body. So in the previous example, or the previous SMTP example that I have shown, we have not used any header there. So to from subjects, these to and from are not the say receipt to or mail from. Those commands are different. SMTP mail from and receipt to commands are different from this header lines. They will be included in the message itself. So this is the message format. This is the format after we provide the data command. This is that particular thing, and the body of the message will have the message, and this body will only have the ASCII characters. Okay, so this is for the user information to, from, and subjects. So we can use this to as a metadata to the message. And now so we have seen that user agent will use SMTP to send a mail to its mail server. Then the mail server, the sender mail server, will use SMTP to receive uh, to send the mail from sender's mail server to the receiver mail server. Now we need another protocol called access protocol, mail access protocol. These are required to read the mail by this user agent. So SMTP will only deliver and store the message or the email to the receiver's server. Afterwards, it can't do anything. After that, we need some mail access protocols to retrieve the mail. The receiver will retrieve the mail using the mail access protocol from its own server. So for that, we have POP, like post office protocol. So this uses authorization and download. So POP is used to download the messages to the client's machine. So it will download, after the authorization, it will download some segments of the mails to its own machine. Whereas IMAP, Internet Mail Access Protocol, provides more features than POP, uh, and it also includes the message to be stored on the server. So IMAP can manipulate the storage in the server itself, whereas POP cannot do that. POP has to download the mails to its own server, and whatever manipulation, whatever filtering we can do in our client side. So it will not be reflected if the client is going to use the POP from other machine. So if the client is using POP from other machine, so the particular client has to organize its mail again. So the organization that the client has already done in a particular machine will not be reflected on other machine, because this is basically a offline mode something. So the mails will be downloaded, then it will be kept or organized in the local machine only. Whereas IMAP is a more advanced, more featureless, and it stores the messages on the server. It keeps the messages on the server and always use the internet connectivity to access to the server. So if I am organizing my mailbox using IMAP, then I can access from any machine the same organized data or organized mails. Also, HTTP can be used to access mails from the user agent like Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo Mail does basically. So POP3 is has two phases: authorization phase and transaction phase. So in authorization phase, the client can use passwords like commands like user password, user to declare the username, password to have the or to give the password to the server, and then server will respond with some messages like okay, error. Okay means everything is okay, fine, you can move forward. Also error if the password or username is not correct, something like this. In the transaction phase, you can use or the user can use these four commands: list, retr, del, and quit. So list will list all the messages with some numbers, so it will list all the messages with some id. You have to use those ids using the retr command to retrieve the particular message or particular mail from the server. Then you can also use the delete command with that particular mail id or the message id to delete a particular mail. Then you can use the quit command to quit the particular transaction or whatever operations or whatever transaction is going on. So this is a simple POP3 interaction where you can use the telnet command telnet server 110 to invoke the POP3, or you can go to the POP server using the telnet server 110 command. Then you can authorize using the user bob password hungry. The client can authorize itself. Then after that you can use say list, and it will show a list of messages, say 498. So this is the message id for the first mail. So this is the message id for the second mail, something like this. So if you enter retr1, so it will show the content of the message one. So that means that whatever content it is in this particular message will be shown here. Also you can use delete one, so this will delete this particular mail from the server, or rather from the client. Then you can quit, so to stop the interconnection between the server and the client. So this is how a simple POP3 actually works. So more about POP3. So we can see that previous example uses POP3 download and delete mode. So Bob cannot reread email if he changes client. So if he change the client, it cannot use or reread the particular mail. The Bob has to download all the mails. Again, POP3 download and keep copies of messages on different clients. So different client will have different copy of the messages. So it is not going to interact directly with the server. Stateless across session. That means from all the sessions, the POP3 is a stateless server. But in from the same machine, if I am using the same client to access the POP, to access the mail server using POP, it will keep the state uh, from a particular machine. But if we are using different clients and we are using POP3 to access a mail server, so it will be a stateless across the sessions. Whereas IMAP, it keeps all the machine in one place, that is the server. So it will keep all the machine, all the mails, all the messages at the server only, and it allow the user to organize messages in the folders. So as the messages are kept on the server, everyone can access the mails from that particular server. So all the clients, if I am all the clients of a particular user is using IMAP to access something or some server, some mail server, so they will have a concurrent state. So IMAP actually keeps tracks of the session, uh, the name of the folders, the mapping between the message ID and the folder, everything. So this is how IMAP is different from the POP. It is more advanced than the POP. So in the next topic, I will discuss DNS, and before that, I can upload a video how SMTP and POP3 can be used in real life using the terminal actually. Hope you like the video. Thank you.